So just lastly, looking at the state of the cities here in this country, that is South Africa, and according to the 2021 State of the Cities report, inclusive growth in cities is of utmost importance, and cities have the ability to address historic economic constraints. But while cities are key drivers of productivity, economic gains are not always evenly distributed, and many South Africans are still excluded from participating and benefiting meaningfully. Joining us to speak on the State of the Cities report for 2021 is Sithole Mbanga, the Chief Executive Officer at the South African Cities Network. So thanks so much for your time. Just reflecting on this year's report, have our cities done better or gotten worse in terms of their mandate to fulfill some of the key development targets?
Well, good afternoon, and thanks for having us on your show. It's a bittersweet type of a report. I mean, in terms of the end result. There are instances where you can see that cities, despite the fact that they are working against a very strong tide that is working against their own attempts to ensure delivery of services, to achieve inclusivity, to become much more economically productive. So there's a big struggle that they're facing. In fact, what this has actually done is to expose the level of complexity that is in the running of most, if not all, of the South African cities, towns, and rural municipalities.
Mm-hmm. This struggle that you describe, is it broad-based, or are there some cities that are doing better than others in achieving some of their development objectives?
Well, it is broad-based, strictly speaking. And I think it's important for me to share the fact that we have not only just looked at the last 5 years. I mean, we've looked at the state of cities over the last 15 years or so. In fact, the last chapter of the report reflects on the state of local government in general in South Africa from the time when it was established in the year 2002. And three big things have happened in that 20 years. Firstly, around 2008, you had an economic downturn, a global economic downturn. Secondly, you then had the impact of climate change, which plays itself out from as far back as 2014 in most of these municipalities. And then lastly, the last one that we have had has been the impact of COVID on the sustainability of an institution called a municipality. So really leaving them as very in a weakened position than they were when they were first established in the year 2002. So it's quite generic. There are, however, also specific issues depending on which municipality that you are looking at. Issues around the human capacity, for instance. So you're talking here about the availability of expertise, the ability of the institutions to be innovative, given the tide that they are working against. You're talking about the lack of governability or good governance practices as typified by acts of corruption. You're talking about the lack of interface between administrative and political leadership. All those kinds of things are things that have mitigated against the possibility of these municipalities and cities, particularly the large cities, to be able to achieve their objectives.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would even add to that, in terms of what we have seen in the last decade or the last 5 years or so, is various provinces and cities being run by multiple parties, right? We've got this advent of the coalition governments that wasn't something that was as prevalent in our past. And I'm just wondering to what degree the running of certain cities by one or two parties has played into the equation of cities not being as excellent in achieving some of their service delivery objectives?
Well, from where we stand, I mean, running an institution or a public institution through a political coalition is something that has been experienced in many other parts of the world. So it doesn't matter whether you are a coalition or a non-coalition. What the most important thing is political maturity. It's very possible to run a government that is formed by a coalition, provided that there is political maturity. In other words, the ability to compromise, the ability to put the needs of society, the needs of the customers of the municipalities first, before the needs of those that will be in that particular coalition. Unfortunately, in most of the municipalities that have experienced a coalition, we have not seen that political maturity. There are instances where, for instance, in other municipalities, you've had a change in mayorship 3 times within a space of 5-year term of office. Clearly, that's a big sign of instability. And mind you, whenever there's a change in the political guard, it automatically gets followed by a change in the administrative guard, i.e. The city manager or the municipal manager would become vulnerable because those that are seen to have appointed him or her have left office, and those that are now coming into power would find ways of getting rid of that particular individual, thus making the institution vulnerable from a leadership point of view, whether it is at an administrative or at a political level.
Mm-hmm. You make the argument in terms of recommendation that how we fix the situation is if we have an all-of-society approach and an all-of-government approach in addressing some of the shortfalls presently amongst our cities. What does that mean? And practically, what does that look like?
In the South African case, I think what seems to have happened is that when democratic local government was put in place in 2002, the rest of society seemed to have relegated the function of governing a city in a way that seeks to achieve inclusivity and equitability to those that are in office, to those that are in power. There has been very much less participation of civil society organizations in the running of the affairs of the municipality. There's also been much less participation of the corporate citizen. In other words, the private business sector has played less of a role. Now, it varies. I mean, indications are that those that were in political office did not create sufficient space for civil society to partake in the governance of the municipality, and similarly, the participation of the private sector in the governance of the municipality. And irrespective of what were the drivers of that lack of participation, the issue at stake now is that if we have to turn the tide towards a downward spiral that we are currently experiencing at a municipal level, everybody has to put their hands on deck. And that's what we mean by all of society. Everybody has to be concerned by the possibility that there will be less and less government in a municipal space as a result of the instability of that institution. And our concern should make us understand that at some point when you have less government, you will have less services, right? You'll have less water services, you'll have less energy, you'll have less reticulation of energy, and all the services that ordinarily we rely on as private citizens and as business citizens in order for us to focus on what it is that we think we are best capable of doing rather than governing the municipality. That's what it means.
All right. Let's hope we can achieve that, I suppose, at least in the foreseeable future, sir. But we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your time. Sithole Mbanga, the Chief Executive Officer at the South African Cities Network.